Magda, I want to go back. You came to South Africa at the age of 13. You were a refugee from Poland. A rough life in Poland, a hard time in refugee camps. What's your strongest memory from that time?
My memories, early memories of life in Poland are very good ones. I mean, it's not that people had much, but everyone had the same, so you didn't know that you didn't have. So I grew up in a 30 square meter apartment with a brother and a sister and a grandmother, thrown in for good measure. But so did all my friends, you know. And the one thing about communism in its purest form then was that, you know, the healthcare was free, education of very high quality was free, and everyone was employed. But obviously these kind of systems are unaffordable. So eventually all these USSR satellites went bankrupt.
Yes.
And literally overnight Poland ran out of food. And, you know, we were given food stamps and had to queue for food. So then, roughly in the early 1980s, about 3 million Eastern Europeans left as refugees, illegally crossing the border into Austria, Germany, and were housed in these refugee camps. And we spent about a year in a refugee camp. And those were the tough times. I think, you know, that's where, you know, I saw my father digging ditches, and my parents are medical doctors, in order to just earn some money. You know, I slept on a bunk bed, and above me was a guy who has walked from the Ukraine. That's the strongest memory I have, really. A guy who walked from a Ukraine and developed gangrene. So, you know, it's like he kind of was, you know, unable to ever move from that bed, actually. And then, you know, while we were waiting in those camps, I mean, they, you know, those are not great memories. I can't say that the memories of that refugee time in Austria were great. You know, I do remember Austrian kids throwing stones at us, you know, so it was a tough time.
And then you come to South Africa. You speak no English, you definitely speak no Afrikaans. No. And you end up at Pretoria Girls High.
Yes.
And how was that? Because presumably you had some catching up to do.
I had some catching. Well, interestingly enough, science and maths I didn't have any catching up to do, because I was about 3 years ahead of, you know, where South African syllabus was. But, you know, landing up at Pretoria Girls High, I mean, that was only a function, and we were very lucky that I landed up and my sister at Pretoria Girls High, because, you know, we rented a flat in Sunnyside. And so that was zoned for Pretoria Girls High. And it's obviously a very, very good school, but, you know, being thrown as a bit of an oddity, not speaking the language, not having money for nice clothes, you know, teenage girls can be a brutal thing. So a few years ago, I was asked to be the guest speaker at the valedictorian service. And,
at the school?
At the school.
Yeah.
And obviously I had a big speech prepared, which was fine, you know, inspirational as it should be. But I had two openings to that speech. And one was, oh, thank you to the school, I am what I am.
Yes.
The other opening was, these were the worst years of my life. And up until I stood on that stage, I didn't know.
You hadn't decided?
I haven't decided.
Did you spin a coin?
No, I stood on that stage and I went with what, you know, my gut was telling me. These were the worst years of my life. So.
The audience response may have been a little muted in the beginning.
You know what? The audience response was interesting, because obviously it only came from the girls after the speech was over and the prize giving was over. And obviously all the prefects shunned me. But the oldest girls came up to me to thank me for saying that, because that's exactly how they have felt, that these were really tough years, and now someone has given them a voice. So I actually felt quite proud of myself.
In a very modern environment that you've created for your business, there's a very old, large clock that's just behind me, and I'm sure there's a story about it. Tell us about the clock.
So the clock is over 120 years old, and it's the only thing that I have taken out of Poland. Obviously not while we were crossing the border illegally as refugees. You know, some of our possessions were put into storage, and this clock was one of those possessions. And I remember growing up in the apartment to this clock chiming every half an hour. That is my strongest memory of childhood. And so, you know, when I grew up, I tried to find this clock, and it took a little bit of time to locate where it was, and it was in some storage garage somewhere, disassembled in pieces. And I had it brought out to South Africa in pieces, and I had it restored here. And this is my childhood memory. I remember fondly sitting on the couch. I happen to suffer from insomnia, so I don't sleep a lot. And sitting there on the couch.
Chiming clock isn't necessarily the best thing for that.
Yeah, well, it tells you every half an hour
Yes.
that you're not sleeping.
Yes.
Of sitting on the couch, reading a book, listening to the clock chiming. So it has, it probably, if the offices were burning and I had to grab one thing, it would be, as hard as it might be, it would be that clock.
You may need help. It's interesting that you hear the chimes, but it's also indirect, not quite direct light. If you look to the left of your computer screen, it's there to see. Is it something of a totem as well as a memory?
I think it's the only thing that I have from my childhood. So when we crossed the border, one of the issues about being refugees and the way we did it illegally, I had to leave everything behind. So every doll, every teddy bear, every single thing that makes you, that you might still be keeping in a box. I don't have that box. So this is the link to the past. This is the link to my childhood. So it's a hugely emotive piece for me.